Utah Politics.
Time now to dig into some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have State Auditor John Dougal and former State Senator Scott Howell. Gentlemen, great to have you with us. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for the invite.
Let's start off with inflation. Everyone's feeling it, whether you're at the pump, at the grocery store, the hardware store, no matter where you go, you're feeling it. John, let's start with you. How did we get here? What's the cause?
Well, there's a couple causes here. Clearly, the pandemic, the lockdown, it restricted supply chains, which limited parts and pieces and goods that are out there in the market. We also had people that were locked down. We had extra money pumped into the economy, so we had lots of money spent on goods away from services. People that used to spend things on services because of the pandemic were now spending on goods, and then they had extra money to spend. Roll all that together, and this is the situation we're sitting in. We're seeing wages going through the roof. We're seeing the cost of various goods through the roof if you can actually buy it. I hear lots of horror stories from companies who, you know, supply chain from China is just so restrictive. They're just desperate trying to get goods from wherever they can.
Yeah, I was at the LA port at the end of the year, and those ships were just sitting there backed up for almost as far as I could see. It was quite a sight. Is there someone specific to blame?
You know, one of the things you can blame is clearly the pandemic, but that's hard. That's just an act of nature. But I think one of the key blames is how government has responded as a result of that. Excessively locking things down, not just in the U.S., but, you know, worldwide you've got those dynamics. And then I think, unfortunately, where Congress has stepped in and just injected so much money into the economy, that is having a negative effect right now. We're feeling the backlash as a result.
Okay, Scott, let's bring you in. Your thoughts on the cause and and John's response to government officials playing a role here as well.
Well, I agree with everything that John had said about that, and I think the government officials did go overboard, and it's not a party thing. I think you can blame both parties for being excessive. But in my heart of hearts, I think that there is a little bit of greed that's been going on. I think about these business people who, all the gas station owners, petrol and all those things. When we were in the pandemic, people just didn't travel. I mean, it's obvious because you look now out in the haze that we have. A year ago, we had no haze. But I think that some of those businesses said, okay, we're not making any profits now, we're not making any income, we're not making our revenue projections, and when this comes back, we're going to just lift that button. Housing, I'm shocked at housing, how much, what's happened with that. And you know, when you look at the inflation, it's the Mountain West that's been hit the hardest with over 8% increase in inflation. And you know, people say, well, it's hard to get products here, it's hard to get lumber here and all of that. I still maintain that some of these business people were really sly and savvy, and bottom line, they were greedy, and they still are.
John, do you agree that both parties are to blame here?
Oh, I think you can spread the blame across both parties and internationally as well. But I'm going to question Scott a little bit. You know, you're talking about greedy business owners. We just went through a recruiting cycle in my office in October. We typically pay our interns $20 an hour. We were seeing interns getting offers $23 to $28 an hour. That's 40% more than what we were paying, and we've historically been competitive. And so this isn't just, you know, as you described, greedy business owners. This is rank and file individuals all throughout the economy. It's a much broader dynamic than just... Well,
I wouldn't disagree with you on that point at all, because I think that the labor market did need to raise, you know, when we saw wages back $10, $15, even less than a year ago. But I do believe on the other side of it, and I'm talking more about the supply chain, where people are holding back or businessmen are saying, you know, I just don't know if that lumber can come through. Let's just tack on another 15 or 20% on it. That's really what I was referring to. But the labor market, it's interesting, the dynamics of that, because when those wages go up, guess who pays for it?
Well, absolutely. You know, Glenn, we've got the dynamic, which is wages start ratcheting up, which causes goods and services to go up, right. and then people say, I need a raise, and it gets into this cycle that's difficult to end.
Let's get into solutions. John, how do we get out of this?
Well, one of the key things from my perspective is we need to have people stop saying, Congress, do something. Yeah. I mean, we need Congress to just stop and let folks throughout the economy figure this out and work things out. The other thing is I'd be very cautious of the Federal Reserve. They want to act like they can pull certain levers and have a soft landing and temper inflation. Maybe they've helped avoid the economy crashing in the past, but I don't think they have a great record in terms of soft landings. So we need to be cautious there. We need to look to say, let's empower individuals all throughout our economy to help fix this problem. Let's not look to D.C.
Scott, your thought on solutions?
Well, I think in addition to what John has just articulated there, that there's got to be a reasoning of what we do. The housing industry, if it continues where it is, no one will be able to afford a house in Utah. And I think when John talks about the feds, they do have some levers on increasing those interest rates. And the Fed chair recently said that he thought there would be 4 increases over the next 12 months. And I think we've got to get back in the balance. It kind of reminds me of the Carter time when gasoline was rationed out and all those type of things. And it really was about a supply and demand at that point in time. And I think the consumer it's all going to come back. And there's no reason, zero reason why we keep putting money, the feds keep putting money back into this certain segment of the economy. That makes no sense. Let the economy run by itself. Let capitalism really flourish.
Okay, let's, one last point on this I want to hit on. You both agree there's plenty of blame to go along for both parties. However, Democrats control Washington right now, the White House and both chambers of commerce, as thin as the margin may be. Voters are feeling the pain of this. Scott, let's start with you on this one. Is this going to be a rough midterm election for Democrats, given the fact that they control all 3 right now?
Yes. And if you go ask my good friend Joe Biden that Democrats control it, you better go talk to Senator Manchin and Kristen down in Arizona, because it really has not become a party thing. It's more of the individuals. And I don't disagree with Joe and Kristen, what they say about the economy and about some of the things they're doing. But, it's the most precarious position I've ever seen our Congress and our executive branch in the history of our country. And, they've been able to get some things through. The ARPA was a big deal. And Joe's got a couple infrastructure bills. But when it comes to other things that are happening in our country, that margin of Democrats being in control, I would argue that that's not real.
John, how will this impact the midterms?
I think he's absolutely right. It'll be a very rough year for the Democrats, not because the Republicans are doing a great job, but because the Democrats own the economy right now.
Right.
And when people are feeling the pain, they're going to get punished because of it.
And historically, you tend to see when, in a situation like this, that it does swing anyway, but also these circumstances we're dealing with. All right, real quick, we need to move on to the legislative session. Your thoughts on the state legislature overturning local mask mandates across the state? John, let's start with you.
Well, you've got this interesting dynamic. I mean, Salt Lake County imposed a mask mandate, but they don't even want to enforce it in their own buildings. It's just kind of this weird kind of dynamic. People are really confused right now, and I think a lot of folks, they understand how to deal with the pandemic, where they feel safe, where they don't feel safe, and I think picking a fight with the governor and the legislature was probably not the right approach for Salt Lake County to do.
Scott?
Day one, they came out boxing, and it's going to be interesting as we see what's going to happen next week, where they are on all of that. The mask mandate, I don't know. I'm not an anti-masker. I just wear a mask because I want to protect me. I want to protect my family. I think this all could really come to an end if everybody just go out and get the jab, get both vaccinations, get the booster. And I think that whole, and I don't know how this has turned into political football. That's the other thing that drives me crazy. How does a pandemic all of a sudden become this political football? It's crazy to me. It makes no sense, and it shouldn't be there. We've got more important things to do at the legislature. We got the haze in the air. We have big problems there, and that's really where we should be focused on. But our first legislation that passes is the mask mandate.
John, answer that question. How did this turn into a political football?
Well, I think part of it goes all the way back to the beginning of the pandemic. First, government officials overstated certain dynamics. They wanted certainty in their answers when there was a world of uncertainty. We didn't know COVID-19. We didn't know how it responded, how it behaved. We had certain officials saying, don't wear masks to try and protect the mask supply. Then they started saying, wear masks and all this type of thing. I think if government would have been a little more humble throughout this dynamic, saying, here's our best understanding right now. we're making the best decisions we can and engage the public rather than giving these firm ultimatums of this is what's going to happen, this is what's going to happen. Vaccines, we were told, hey, you know, you get the vaccine, you won't get COVID. Now we're being told, well, it's not going to be as harmful, and you won't get as
Scott,
sick.
real quick, respond to that. You've got to be real fast, though.
I think the bottom line is that the beginning was all wrong, and let's hope that the end will be better for everyone.
All right, gentlemen, great conversation. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.